Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about leveling in MMOs. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast?
On this podcast that you and I co-host together, we talk about games and sometimes movies and sometimes other stuff. So yes, but today we're talking about video games. Today we're going to be talking about MMOs, leveling, a topic near and dear to Mango's heart, because this was his topic idea, not mine. But I was gonna say that it was near and dear to my heart, but then I kind of realized that it really wasn't. I hadn't really thought about it until you brought it up today. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about. But before that, obviously, we played some video games this week. We played some Pathfinder. Did we play Rune Lords this week?
No,
I guess we haven't, because we recorded like 3 days ago. But thank God that we can spend all of our opening time on this. We did the first half, unfortunately, of our big bad mega dungeon, 5-hour session for Hell's Rebels, which I was sad that we had to cut short before finishing the dungeon. I was a little bit surprised, actually, that first bit took so long. But we did come to a pretty okay stopping point, and one of our players needed to go get on with his night, so, I'm not going to hold it against him.
I'm pretty sure part of the problem, well, not the problem, but part of the time sink was we spent a lot of time, before we even started broadcasting, doing, house cleaning for, who's going to buy things and how much are things cost, and everybody needs to level up. And
to be completely honest, I don't even hate that, because I would much rather that take up an hour and a half of one of these sessions than an hour and a half of one of the Wednesday sessions, where it's like, well, let's get on with our day. Holy shit, it's 11:30.
Fair enough.
But yeah. It sucks because I have all these things that I want to talk about for the end of book one that I can't talk about yet because we haven't actually finished the whole dungeon. Though I was quite happy with how things turned out. I was surprised that people were kind of so down from an engagement standpoint. My own calling out of Enoch playing PlayStation 4 notwithstanding. I thought we might get a little bit of burnout because it's not part of the usual time scale for how we play Hell's Rebels.
Well, part of it is it's we joke about it all the time, but it's also one of the few full combat sessions that we've had, right? People looking to flex their combat muscles finally got a chance to kind of run wild. I mean, I know personally, the thing that always keeps me from really doing anything distracting is that I broadcast the game, so I can't do anything with sound. So I can't play video games like everybody else does.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I know I found myself a little bit distracted, but I think that's okay because it's Beauregard, and Beauregard gets to take a disproportionate amount of the social combat time. So
yeah, no, I definitely feel that. It's one of those things where with the CC thing, the reason I feel real comfortable going forward with that system is because Beauregard is such a natural, obvious candidate to take over those duties of running between people who are stuck in multi-turn CC and helping them out, getting their shit together.
Or handing off his cane sword to the
handing off his cane sword, handing out potions. Your guys being a 6-player party with a lack of really any healing whatsoever is pretty interesting, I think, and has raised some concern. Actually, do you want to talk about that for a second?
About the wand of cure light wounds things?
The wand of cure light wounds thing. Because we talked about it a little bit during the session, because I am a little bit of. It's one of those things where I know how I feel about it, right? I feel like I have a strong argument against it, but at the same time, I don't like being restrictive, and so I want to hear a good argument to keep it, but I just don't hear one.
Okay,
ever.
so I was actually thinking about this because I understand the issue with the Wand of Cure Light Wounds, but we're also level 4, and I think one of the stronger things, this is kind of an adoption of what Charles was saying, which is while a Wand of Cure Light Wounds allows us to effectively top up our health between each encounter, that's kind of the only resource we get to refill. Every enemy gets to blow all of their resources on us, and we have to be concerned about conserving, our spells or our daily uses of whatever. Mm-hmm. And while for, I guess, the martial characters, Bracox, he might not have to, like, he has more constant use powers, and so health is really his big limiting one. I think for a lot of our party, that like being able to go into a fight with full health is, one, not the worst thing, and two, also not a thing that I think should be particularly hard to balance against. Right, it might require a little bit of work and thought maybe on your side, buddy. And if you don't want to try and play guesswork with that and run the experiments, and that's fine. But I think that you'd probably be able to work around specifically us having full health at the beginning of any encounter.
No, sure. So like, yeah, I mean, this was the argument that Charles was making. The thing that gets me about it is having more of that. Like, I agree that no matter what happens, right, we still have spells, we still have challenge uses per day, that kind of stuff that's going to be keeping people down. But I actually think the best metric that we have to kind of represent like the grueling nature of getting through all of these fights and getting through like that whole dungeon in one day is hit points, because it's something that everybody shares, right? And it's something that it makes healing up between encounters a big deal, right? Like, how many of our pots do we want to spend? Where do we want to spend them, right? What happens when we run out of pots two fights before the big boss, right? Well, all of a sudden now our tactics have to change because we don't have an unlimited supply of hit points to fall back on. So yeah, I agree. Like, from a balance perspective, I totally could balance around that or whatever. But I think it does remove that. It removes that level of kind of tension, which I don't.
See, I think the level that we're at specifically right now, where we, even how many hit points does like Rakox have? Like, you can't have.
Well, Rakox. So to be honest, I actually think, I don't want to say this because it's mean, but I kind of think Rakox has been cheating his hit point totals. He has 44 hit points at level 4, with like 2 or 3 con. I guess it has to be 3 con or whatever, which means that he's rolled 9s or 10s every time. Like, he's rolled like 3 10s in a row kind of thing, which, I trust him or whatever, but he has an abnormally high number of hit points is my point. Most people have around 30.
Right, and Alaric and I have about 20. And I think that's like right in the area where like a good hit or two takes you down. So I don't know. I feel like that sort of I feel like for the most part, the difference, like if we're Captain Crunches, we're gonna play this mechanically the way we play it, and so the optimal solution to go into each fight is to spend our healing, or like to spend our healing as soon as we need it, because conserving it doesn't really do anything, right? Like, whether or not you get hit doesn't really matter, right? Like, so long as you can. The only thing it prevents us from doing is like risking an overheal, right? Like, you just only stay within 9 HP of your total. Because if you, like, there's no reason not to fill it to that point, if that makes sense.
Sure, no, definitely, right? But that's a big deal, staying within 9 HP of your total. When your total is 36 hit points, that's 25% of your HP bar.
Sure. Yeah,
and the thing is like, it doesn't quite bother me from it doesn't quite bother me in a concept of like individual fights, but in like the chain of the multiple fights. If I just give you a well, right? If I just give you a well that says, all right, take a shot glass, dip it in the well, drink it, that's 1 HP. Even if you fill to full precisely after every fight, that well still runs out. And so then then we get into this point where now our tactics have to change because we don't have the healing available, right? Or we're spending more important resources like Weirdin's Hunter spells in order to get our healing down. That's the progression into that zone, and whether or not that zone comes to be is the interesting thing to me, if that makes sense.
See, I don't think you get the effect that you're looking for, though. Like, I think all of that comes in, like, what we spend our in-combat healing with, which, maybe we're at the tail end of Cure Light. I think we are at the tail end of things of Cure Light Wounds being effective in combat healing, which I can appreciate from a not wanting to use the wand perspective. But I think that's where the tension comes from, is the microcosm of the individual fight, not the... And like, that's how those resources get divided. I don't think the intercombat kind of scenes are the things that cause that that to
Well, so
happen.
but it's not about like the scene, right? It's not about between combat having there be like a scene. It's about from one fight to another fight, my tactics change.
Like no, I get like I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying I don't think you're right. Like I don't think
Really, you've never had that experience?
I don't think that limiting health the way you are creates that scenario, right? I think the big decisions about how we use our spells comes from, do we need to heal somebody in the middle of a fight? Not, how do we change the way we fight? I actually don't think as a group we change our fighting tactics at all. I don't think Rakox is going to not charge into the fight.
That's true too, but whatever.
Right, but like, and I don't think any amount of like this kind of manipulation of the health pool stops that. It's because like the people, the way it's kind of set up right now, right? Like Rakox, maybe Weirin, and Marikrug are all beefy enough so that them being within 9 hit points of their total isn't a huge deal, and so they can afford to frontline. And then Alaric and Beauregard, are fragile enough that they have to be scaredy cats all the time anyway. And so I don't think that like being at less than maximal hit points really affects that. And I also think that there's like one thing that I kind of think about is like what the kind of the frame for the boss fight wants to be. And I think the boss fight is the place where people are willing to ignore like common sense to go be big damn heroes essentially. And at that point, I don't think that the health pool's really like you're. This is actually kind of my whole, or the thing that I don't like. This is a systematic problem, not a problem with the way that you're running it. Just that the fact that when you do a dungeon crawl, you're most likely to be like the lowest on resources when you want to do the cool shit against the boss, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually that's something I don't kind of like about the system that everything's built kind of like it's this build up to a big old boss where you don't get to be as cool as possible because you had to like responsibly, middlingly shell out your resources in the middle of the in the fight. It's kind of like this is kind of like I think justification for why boss fountains in video games exist, so you can be at your braddest and baddest when you're doing the cool fight.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that to a certain extent. I think that both experiences are valuable. I like the feeling of going into a boss fight on like kind of half resources, and coming out, like those are like the like the grinding, like scraping that victory off the wall kind of boss fights that I like. But then there are the other boss fights where you walk in at tip top shape with your armor glinting in the sun, going completely ham, and that's all. Like both of those experiences are valuable to me. And I think the other half of it is it's also like like if I'm Rakox right now, I'm saving my second challenge for like the boss of boss fights. I may have done a poor job. Well, I mean,
I would say there's a telegraphing problem too. I don't think this is you. I think this is just kind of like there's no way that you should be like, and you go to fight this guy who's probably not the final boss, but like Charles very clearly said, I spent my second level spell because I thought that was it. And frankly, I was going to spend my second level extract. Not that it gives me a lot in terms of fighting, but it's like because I thought that was going to be the last fight too. I think it's a hard thing to.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the statue is. You guys flubbed perception checks on the statue, so you could have seen that the statue was a secret doorway, but you didn't, and so. Well, like, I think the dungeon is ideally built for, you get halfway through, you find this thing, oh, there's a secret passage under here, right? How do we open it? Fuck, you don't know. The DC for the disabled device check is like 30. Who's going to hit that? And then you get to the end of the dungeon, find the book, it has the passcode, come back kind of thing. But that wasn't telegraphed because of how that... And, like, on one end, I kind of want to say, like, that's a good thing, right? But it's also just like, the dice didn't really work out kind of thing.
Well, I was going to say, perception check is not something we lack for as characters. That's just kind of like a dice suck thing.
No, yeah, I mean, sure, but it's also another thing where, like, on a macro level,
Oh, yeah,
right? The Phantasmagorium itself, did that really read like the secret, archivist's library to you? Like maybe not like the way that the ending kind of clumped everything together is one thing, but
it didn't read like the secret library, but it read like that was a red herring, and we were supposed to go somewhere else afterwards.
Wait, you read that the statue was a red herring?
No, not the statue was a red herring. But as we were approaching that final fight, I was like, oh, they must be somewhere else. This must have been like a bad lead.
Oh, interesting. No, it's just a mini boss.
Sure. No,
yeah.
I get that now. But when I'm moving into that fight, I'm like, this must be like, the end of the fight. We must have had a bad lead and we must be going somewhere else. Like after this, and maybe we have to do it immediately, and that's why it's a mega or something like that, right? Like, or like without like. Also, because like this is a very meta thing, but like it was approaching 8 o'clock, and you said the session was going to be like 4 or 5 hours long. I was like, oh, we must be towards the end of things, like.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Like just like everything was lining up so perfectly for that to be the last encounter of the dungeon that I was like, oh, well, I guess that's it. And I like in that kind of case, I'm like, well, I guess the story will resolve itself at some point. Let's go with it, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. That I think that's a tough thing to kind of like.
Yeah, I do see it is a little bit of a perfect storm, so to speak. I'm excited for the rest.
I am excited for the rest of the dungeon too.
I imagine next week will be. I posted probably like 85% of what are the first iteration of mass combat rules. So I imagine we'll be coming back to that for great fun Pathfinder times next week or the week after kind of thing, and going whole hog into the end of book 1 when book 1 finally ends on this Wednesday. But that's not the only thing. Did you play any games? The Steam sale's happening. So.
I did. I played. I've mentioned it in some of our discussions to you, not on the cast. I played last night actually all of Pony Island. Pony Island. I think the game. Let me bring up the Steam page real quick because I think the game straight up tells you. So I don't think it's a real spoiler. Give me 1 second here. Pony Island on Steam. Only $3 until the 4th of July. It straight up tells you, you're playing this silly little arcade game called Pony Island, but you're trapped in limbo. And it's about kind of like the game is kind of like a progression through like an adventure of this kind of lost soul trying to deal with limbo, but it's through like the lens of this arcade cabinet where you play this very, very basic game. It's not a long game. This is one of these kind of avant-garde indie type games, but it is a little bit more than a walking simulator. There is actual gameplay. It's not particularly tough, but there's some puzzles and there's some like action gameplay. It's got all the sort of like requisite secrets and secret endings and little fun stuff that you can do as is popular with these types of games these days. And for like even the $5 base price, it's it's a good 4-hour experience, and I'd highly recommend it. And on top of that, it's made with Unity Personal Edition, which means that like one guy did this, which is super impressive actually.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and you could tell because it announces Unity Personal Edition, which means he didn't pay anything for the tool. But it means that it gets to advertise at the front end of it. I think that's actually really cool. That's really cool to me as someone who has in past lives when I had more free time aspired to do something like that and ultimately never got that far. I recommend it on that front as well to support like a new developer in that way. It's a good game. That's worth supporting
that is interesting. Unfortunately, I have not really been playing too many. I did buy some games today. I bought like 5 games today. What did I buy? I bought The Witcher 3 because For someone who purports that Western RPGs are my favorite kinds of games, I actually don't play all that many of them. And I want to broaden my horizons, so to speak, to get into the Witcher 3 territory because it was cheap. I bought the Sniper Elite games, which I've always V2 and V3, which I've always heard are great games, and were also super cheap. And I'm actually looking forward to play those games because my understanding is that they actually play a lot more like stealth games. Like they basically, that level from Call of Duty Modern Warfare that everyone thinks is the best level ever, where you go to Chernobyl in the ghillie suit and you snipe the guy or whatever. It's basically just a game built entirely around like the mechanics almost
of sniping.
Of that level, which is like the most intriguing, enticing thing that I've wanted, that I have wanted for a long time. Another game that I bought was Tropico 5. It's a strategy sim game I've never got to, and then this War of Mine, which I have heard only ever good things about, but also never gotten around to.
So fun fact, I own all those games except for Tropico. I haven't played them because I have been looking to get around to them and have not. So maybe we could do a simultaneous playthrough at some point. We could share our thoughts and feelings about these games.
Yeah, I'm definitely all about that. I mean, I'm such in a... I am just now falling out of Total War Warhammer after 91 hours. Total War Warhammer kind of like funk. Because I've gotten to that point where I've figured out enough of the game. I've beaten the game on every race except for vampire counts, and I'm at that point where I can't lose the game anymore. I'm just the strongest guy. I could be at war with the entire world and just like beat them so badly because I own half the continent kind of thing. So I'm eagerly awaiting DLC and new stuff to come out, and I will, go back to it as soon as possible. But until then, I don't really mind dropping Total War Warhammer. Instead, I've been getting back into Hearthstone because I freaking hate myself. Though I have resolved not to spend money on it this time like I did last time, where I used to trade, 30-cent ramen lunches and spend all my money on Hearthstone instead of that, which was super stupid.
I also bet you've been playing some of that Overwatch.
Yeah, I've been playing Overwatch. I don't really have new thoughts about Overwatch, to be honest. I'm playing more of it. I feel like I'm getting better and better as time is going on. But I don't know.
Oof. I don't know if you've heard, but they're nerfing Torbjorn on consoles.
I have heard that. I think that that's a very welcome nerf. That nerf has been sold to me by basically the Overwatch subreddit complaining about it. But I think in a world of consoles, auto-aiming Torbjorn turrets are not the greatest thing in the world. Especially when you stack them. Stacking Torbjorn turrets is basically the worst.
Yeah, if you're a scrub. Scrub. Yeah, no. I think it's a fine change. I have read arguments that it should be. It's a 30% flat damage nerf. I have heard arguments that it should be an acquisition time nerf rather than
that is. I actually think that is correct. I think that is the proper nerf, but I don't think that this.
Yeah.
Yeah. This being like. This is like, an A- nerf, and that's like an A+ nerf, but we're still in the A range of nerfs, so...
The other part of this, too,
out of shape about it.
is this is all theory from us, because neither of us play on the consoles, so we've never
had
to deal
my boss plays on... my boss plays on console, so it's him who has told me all about the terribleness of Torbjorn on console, and I kind of take his word for it.
All right, well, I think that's it for both of our games this week, unless you had anything else you want to talk about.
No, I'm good to go. I'm good to go.
So let's get into our main topic, which is leveling in MMOs. Now, as Buddy said, this is my idea, so I kind of want to lay this out in kind of the way that it came to me. Essentially, a lot of modern MMOs, World of Warcraft, what's the one I dabbled in recently? Terra, and I think like Guild Wars. I think most of the modern MMOs the sentiment is kind of the game starts when you hit the level cap. And a lot of this is so true that a lot of games give you experience boosts, either in flat level gains, percentage boosts, or in some cases like the ability to just straight up buy your way to like near the level cap, to kind of get through that experience as quickly as possible, before kind of getting to the real meat of the content, which is typically the end game content, or if I'm going to be a little bit more lax, in World of Warcraft's case, the leveling content of the latest expansion, and the end game content. And so the thought kind of occurs to me that if this is the case, if that we want to get through the leveling process as fast as possible, why do we even have it in the first place? Other than it's kind of just like content filler. And is there a way to either do it right so that leveling isn't this kind of slog that you get to, or maybe like reverse incentivize it so that there's some kind of, assuming the content is worth doing, some reason to go back to it after you've hit the level cap. And maybe why don't we just start these games at level cap instead of having to kind of do this kind of bullcrap? Well, what are your first impressions, buddy?
Okay, I hope I don't make this like a 5-second episode by saying I think there are a couple of reasons for this to be the case. The most important one is like an elongated tutorial where leveling up is how you get your new abilities. As you level, you get these abilities. You learn how to play your class so that by the time that you're at level 100, hypothetically speaking, you have a very solid understanding of what your role is. In the game, kind of as a whole.
Do you need, in the World of Warcraft's case, 99 levels of that though?
So no. But I also think that at the same time, there's a couple of other reasons to it, right? I think that it is better though, right, to have that than to not have that. Second, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but the story of these games is oftentimes related through leveling content more so than it is through other content. And so the most kind of story per minute that you're going to get is going to be through leveling. So for, the story players out there, that's part of why it's helpful.
I feel that, but I think that that's a reason to kind of do something like I said, which is a reverse incentivization. Give players a reason to go back and experience that content for the story, because frankly, most the primary objective of a lot of people is just to get to max level as fast as possible, and skip scores, even skip story content. Like World of Warcraft, the fastest way you level up is you straight up you spam dungeons. And, you get, whatever 10 seconds of story each dungeon has, because most of them are kind of predicated on event quest chains around it that you never see if that's what you're doing. And then you miss on everything else out in the world. Personally, I think the Cataclysm leveling content is excellent. I think it's a bunch of, quite a bit of fun, and I think that kind of holds its own in terms of both pacing and kind of like these story chunks that you talk about. But at the same time, I think that the game would be better served if there was a reason to go back and do that content at max level, and kind of sell that forward and make that a thing. There's already kind of some examples of this I can give from Guild Wars, where you scale to the level of the area, so nothing is So just for those listeners out there that don't know, the way Guild Wars 2 works is you scale to the level of the area that you are in, and you get to still keep your abilities. So, the more abilities that you've unlocked, you still get to use those. They just do scaled down damage. But I think that that's a correct way to kind of get people to do that, other than these completionist feats, which are for crazy people or bored people at the end of the day.
Well, I have a two-handed response to that. First of all, WoW is implementing a system similar to this in Legion. No longer are you going to be funneled through levels at set level ranges for Legion. You can enter the Broken Isles at any zone and level up through that zone. It will scale to your level.
But that's only for Legion content, right?
No, right. But I'm saying, well, leveling still has to happen, but you get to choose how that happens. As to the dungeons for stories things, the original stories in WoW dungeons were sparse. I mean, the original story in WoW was sparse, but they've done a very good job at contextualizing the dungeons so that even if you're doing dungeon content, you're still getting the story of that dungeon down. Because, yes, you're right, the fastest way to level is to spam dungeons, but it's to spam dungeons for the dungeon quests, because they give such, like, ludicrous amounts of experience. And those quests are things that, you have to wait for the cutscene to play, or, like, all of that other kind of stuff. So, in much the same way that when I level as a Forsaken through the Horde-based Eastern Kingdom zones, I'm getting a different story experience than when I'm leveling as, a Night Elf through Kalimdor. That, to me, the dungeons is just another option to that place. I also think plenty of people are happy leveling at the inefficient rate. I personally am happy leveling at the inefficient rate. I very rarely do. I have several ults at various levels in World of Warcraft. And I've been playing World of Warcraft for forever, right? So this is just kind of like a natural thing. But very commonly, I espouse or eschew the dungeon content for the actually leveling up through the zone content. I have just looking at it, I have 3 100s, a level 91, 72, 73, 67. I've been through a lot of content, and very rarely do I fall back on dungeons in order to get there personally. I think there's a difference between, this is the most efficient way to get to end game, and this is the kind of best way to get to end game, if that makes sense. The best way to get to end game is different for a lot of different people. I also think, by the way, World of Warcraft allows you to just buy a level boost that gets you near to the cap. I don't know that it actually boosts you all the way up to 100.
I think it's 90 at this point. I think it's the level cap of the previous expansion.
Right. So you can, if the person who does want to skip all that, just get to, farming raids and stuff with their friend, doing their dailies, doing their max level stuff, go have at it. You spend $60 and you're there, kind of thing. And for the rest of us, those of us, the few of us, if whatever the kind of numbers are, I don't know, we get to level into it.
See,
also, by the way, I think alts is like the other kind of piece of this equation that's like, in some games, alts are they don't exist generally.
You're saying alts is in alternative characters,
yes, right? Alt is in alternative characters, right?
Okay.
The game that I work on, right? Final Fantasy 14, you can level every class to level 60 on one character, so you don't really have the alt experience in the same way necessarily. But when I leveled to 100 on Bairn, it was different than when I leveled to 100. I leveled to 100 actually as when Bairn was Tonrik, and then I swapped him to Horde side at level 100, and then I leveled up through the Horde side stuff as Gondor, and I think Soreth, because of a variety of different reasons. So I actually saw both sides of the content, and that was a very conscious choice. But it still gave me my 3 level 100 characters. In fact, that was a lot of how I got to. That's just kind of like how I play WoW a lot of the time. Is I'll level up another character in another set of zones for that reason. I think it's very easy. I think honestly, I think games like WoW are almost at their best in leveling content, because even though I want to say that like raiding, PvP, these big group-based activities are where where it really takes off. I actually kind of think that like the best personal experience I've ever had in World of Warcraft is when I'm just leveling through the content on my own, not in a mumble server, right? Like listening to the music, spending forever and reading the quest texts, that's when it feels like Skyrim, right? That's when it's immersive. That's when you're setting like these miniature goals for yourself, like, I have to go farm like 150 copper nodes in order to level my engineering.
So here's what I'm going to say to that. I'm going to say that like nothing that you have said is lost or really any different for you if instead of having to level through that content is there and properly incentivized for someone who is already at the max level cap, right? Like, ultimately, it doesn't really make a difference to you if you're doing it from, if you're doing that at level 38 or at the level 100, correct? Does that really make that much of a difference to you?
I'm
just yes or no. I'm not trying to trick you.
I don't quite understand what you're getting at. The idea. So basically, you're saying we should we flip it, right? We say everybody starts at level 100, right? And if you're somebody like me who enjoys that kind of immersive story-based experience or whatever, I can go back and level through that content on my own.
Or not even level, right? That's I think. This is gonna sound a little bit tinfoily, but kind of the way that I've kind of feel about the majority of the content as it exists in a lot of these games, and I think WoW actually does it very well. So I think it falls on kind of the better side of this spectrum, is that it's a lot of filler content to kind of fill out your first X hours with the game because the game doesn't have that much engagement otherwise. You need to give the player 50 hours of leveling in the game because that's what you have to do in order to make the game feel full rather than the game being good at those points. And I think that a better way to do this is to start the character maybe not at level 100, maybe it's at level 90, or maybe it's at level 80. I think say that the way that Death Knight does its intro is pretty good that's kind of the right pace for a lot of people to kind of get into it. That you kind of let that ramp up happen, and then you let you have the rest of this content kind of be out there for people to do if they want to, and also if you do it this way, you incentivize that content for everybody, right? You incentivize the player that normally wouldn't go back and do that content to go do that content for that richer story experience, because right now the only people that go back and do that content are people like you who are interested in stories, or people like potentially me when I get really bored, which is to do it to get completionist achievements. I think that having those adventures give something say a even just gold at the right at a point where it's relevant to a player doing it, is a better way to is just a kind of an overall better way to a better overall experience for the game, if that makes sense, because it lets the raiders go raid near very quickly, and it lets the people who want to do the solo content do that on their own, and it lets it kind of enables everything at a very easy to slide into experience. And I think that kind of is better from a game enjoyment perspective. I think a lot of modern MMOs are kind of wrapped in this idea that you have to kind of do your time and grind through this crab leveling experience. Again, I think that WoW's leveling experience is actually very good at this point in time, at least until level 60 and post maybe level 70 or 80. There's still a rough patch in the middle where some of the old stuff is still there.
I think at this point it's really just Burning Crusade, but I definitely agree with you. I mean, I actually, well, to be honest, I've been through the Wrath of the Lich King content so many times, but I feel that.
Yeah, no, I yeah.
I mean, so I think the big gun argument that this falls apart to, that I probably should have opened with, but I'm in a dramatic mood, is, to me, that is completely reversing the kind of underlying sense of progression that fuels fuels the game. I think if I don't think there's a lot of merit to people who say you shouldn't be able to buy a boost, right? I think that at the end of the day, you know, it's your game kind of thing. If you don't want to do this right, yeah, pay a premium, right? Skip the content. No harm to me. But I do have an issue with that becoming the norm. Because to me, the boost doesn't represent, you know, I don't know, my mom or you know, even just like another gamer, right, that hasn't gotten into, you know, like I have a little cousin, you know, I have a little cousin, he plays tons and tons of Minecraft. Let's say I buy him, you know, a Warcraft account, and I give him the information, right? If he starts at level 90 and, you know, like to me, him starting at level 90 and then getting to level 100 and having to figure out that if you want all of his story stuff, you go back and you do it and you grind it out for gold or kind of like whatever other reason. That's like the opposite progression, right? You want to progress from a little weakling level 1 and go all the way up to level 100 so that by the time that you're at level 100, you like that is like accomplishment. It is being accomplished. It is, you know, it's looking forward to the next, you know, it's looking forward to your next level up because you're going to get a talent, right? You're going to get a new skill, right? Like that, these things, that progression, even if I'm, you know, I'm a buddy who has 3 level 100s and has been playing the game for however many years, I can still get, like, that still happens when I'm playing a level 34 shaman and I'm, you know, excited to get chain lightning. You know what I mean? That's the part where all of this crumbles. I think.
See, I don't think it does. Like, I don't think that's like. I think that in your traditional RPG, in your game of Dungeons and Dragons, in your Witcher 3, in your Skyrim, in a lot of you know, traditionally built RPGs, that is the case, and there's a lot of that. I don't think that holds true for a lot of modern MMOs. I think for a lot of players, a lot of people, it's just a slog through boring content, and is kind of like the nature of the MMO beast, right? Like, your power at level 1 and your power at level 100 relative to the enemies you fight in PvE is almost exactly the same. Like, there is, like, you know, you don't get better at fighting enemies so much as you scale to them and they scale to you. Like,
yeah, but the way that you fight enemies is completely different. I'm spamming Heroic Strike at level 2, but I'm, you know, doing a full rotation at level 98. That, and the all of the little incremental bits in between, that's important. Getting my mount, right? Getting my mount and being able to travel at 60% move speed, then 100% move speed, then 150% move speed with flying, and then, you know, 280% move speed with flying. That progression also counts.
But first of all, those bits of progression don't necessarily need to be tied to the leveling experience. Part 2 of that too is that, like, I don't like. There's not a lot of, like. I don't feel like that's really there for these MMOs, right? Like, I don't think that, like, there's this, like you say Heroic Strike at level 2, but you're also, like, incorporating more skills by, like, level 4, and then, like, you get a good handle on what you're doing by, like, level 16. You know, a lot of your progression in terms of, like, skills is very front loaded, because otherwise the game gets really boring really fast. As someone who leveled through vanilla WoW on a priest, I can tell you that that's definitely the case. That it's just like spamming smite on things for like 24 hours.
No, I totally 100% understand that. I also think the vanilla WoW, I think people wax, you know, and wane about vanilla WoW being amazing. Obviously, like, it's in the news recently because of legacy servers, but, like, it really begs, I don't know, it just really begs a lot of questions. I remember tanking the Dead Mines dungeon as a warrior, but we didn't have taunt. Like, taunt didn't exist as a button. And even when I got taunt, I believe it had a 5-minute cooldown or something. You know, like, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I feel like this is coming from a place of like, look, if I wanted to just pick up Terra, right? You and I both love Trin Immortal. He had that.
Yeah.
He had that video. It's the reason that all of our friends got back into Terra, because he had the thing with his guild or whatever. And I legitimately thought about it or whatever. But I understood that the kind of the investment involved to get to level whatever the cap is, 65, is like that's a lot of man hours.
See, that's the thing. It's not. I played for like an afternoon and got all the way to level like 30 something because the game just throws like 700% experience boosts at you left and right because they know that the leveling through the content is. See, this is actually kind of this is actually a very specific problem because I've seen it in other games too. I've seen it in WoW as well, which is this kind of eagerness to get you through the content kind of actually fucks with the storytelling a lot. Like I'm like in many ways I'm like you. I like enjoying these stories that get told. But because the game is so eager to shove you through the story, you outlevel the content of the story that you're on, and you either have to like not gain at some points forego reasonable experience to finish out the story block, or just skip the end part and go on to the next story because they want you to kind of like hyperactively get through these beginning levels as fast as possible. And maybe that's just a bad aspect of design, and maybe what I want is somewhere kind of in between these things. Maybe I'm being a little bit hyperbolic when I want to say abolish all leveling, but like maybe the speed wants to be faster.
So, okay, you can finish your point.
So I have leveled 2 characters to cap. The caps were different in World of Warcraft, to be clear. Mm-hmm. The caps were different when I did them. I leveled a priest to 60, maybe like a week before Burning Crusade dropped. And I leveled a monk to level 90 and then 100 as Warlords dropped. And the experience on the monk was so much better because that experience was so streamlined. I think I played like maybe a third of the time leveling on that monk than I ever did on my priest. And I got, that's like literally 1.5 times as many levels.
Wait. So it was better because it was faster?
Yes.
That is interesting. So here's the thing.
It's not just better because it was faster. Right? It was better because I think the content was better, but also because yes, it's better because it's faster, but not because it was speedy for speedy's sake, but I felt that it was at a better pace, right? Like I felt that like 1 through 60 was virtually painless. 60 through 80 was and like 80 through 90 was fine again because it was the newest content, and like 90 through 100 when Warlords dropped was fine again because it kind of had like I think this is another part of it too, is that because a lot of the game is so focused on the end content, the only time like leveling truly feels like you're in a world is on like expansion releases when everybody's kind of still leveling their mains to 100. Like I feel like the worlds feel very empty otherwise.
Man,
I know I said a lot there, so take your time.
Okay, so here's the big thing. I think that in order to get the best leveling experience for WoW, for me personally, but just in general, is you have to not do stuff sometimes, if that makes sense. The fastest
explain that.
The fastest way to level up is to get all of the heirlooms, which by the way, I totally have. I have like 1 billion heirlooms or whatever. Put them on your character and go ham in these dungeons. And to be fair, I've definitely done that. But my favorite way to level in WoW is not to do that. In fact, to do so much to possibly recreate. I don't send myself gold on my alts. I create an alt. I get him some regular old professions, and I level up through the zones, at a really meandering slow pace. I like to finish out zones. Even if I over level the content, which happens, pretty often. I like to completely finish the zone before I get before I get going, right? I don't buy a mount until I have enough gold to buy a mount. I purposefully, this is how Burning Crusade content is good for me, because all of that content was built so that all of that leveling content is built without a mount in mind. So I never buy the level 60 flying mount, even though I generally do have the gold I need to get it. I don't get it. I just do it with my regular running on the ground mount. And I think you kind of, you have to negotiate with the game in order to find what works for you. I think for the people who are feeling the way that you want to, right? I want to be max level. I want to do all that max level stuff. I think there's more than enough tools for them to skip the leveling content without too much of a hassle, right? By, buying the boost, right? By getting all of the heirlooms, by spamming the dungeons, right? Those things are in there for those players. But I don't think that's the only kind of player that exists. And I think that the leveling experience is really useful for the rest of us, the rest of us out there. I don't think I would play WoW if it didn't have a leveling experience. I don't know. I wonder if I would. I love that game. I will go to I will go to bat for that game any day of the week.
So part of this too is like this is also, I don't know what your other experience with MMOs are. This is not just an analysis of the way WoW does it, because like as I've said, I think WoW is actually one of the better games doing this. In fact, I think honestly, I think the best game that ever did this was Guild Wars 1, which is a game that I adore and love, and I don't like Guild Wars 2 nearly as much, and that makes me sad. But Guild Wars 1 let you make a character. There were 20 levels of content, which was done, you could do in a reasonable amount of time. It wasn't fast. Or you could make a character at max level for PvP purposes. And there was some interplay, like you needed to do PvE to get certain skills, or you had to grind a bunch of PvP. But I thought that was a kind of good balance. They also, like, endgame raids weren't as much of a thing. I don't really think it is in Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 1 was really a lot about PvP, but I think that, like I said, I think WoW and Guild Wars 1 do it well. I think there's a lot of games that don't do it great, too. And I think that...
I don't know. You're right. The first MMO I ever played was WoW, and I basically loved it so much that I never even tried anything else. I've played Guild Wars 2. Man, that might be all. Those might be the only two MMOs I've ever played in my life.
So buddy, I think I've got a good way to put this for you. If every time you wanted to level an alt, you had to do vanilla WoW progression all the way to 90, would you have viewed that as positive of an experience?
No. But that's because I think that the choices exist, right? The key thing to me is that you allow both options by putting in by putting in the choices, basically, right? Because heirlooms and dungeon spamming and all these other things exist, it neutralizes the problem to me. Because if I do feel like it's going too slow, I can do any number of things in order to make it fast. And I don't think you can really hit that sweet spot for the majority of players. I think there are going to be players who, are down for what you're doing, and I think that there are players who, aren't, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I got about 20 levels into Guild Wars 2, which I think has a higher level cap of about 60. The problem with Guild Wars 2 for me is that, I really liked the thing of you need to use your skills in order to level the, in order to, like, unlock the other skill, like the other of your weapon skills, and then you have all 5 of your weapon skills, or all however many of your weapon skills kind of thing. I thought that was great. And then they had this thing where each level you gained points, and sometimes you go around the map and you found other places and you fought these guys and you earned points in order to get other kind of secondary skills. I loved that. And then maybe 10 days after I started leveling, they patched it so that wasn't the case anymore. That whole thing where you earned points and you spent these points in whatever way, it happened that at big checkpoint levels of 30, 35, 40 or whatever, you just kind of got a big amount of points to dump, and I was like, oh, well, fuck it, I'm out kind of thing. So,
yeah,
man, I don't even know.
So, I think the kind of way, the kind of thing I want to advocate for, and kind of the jumping off for this, is that I think the unfortunate consequence of kind of the fact that you level through content and you kind of don't look back in a lot of ways is unfortunate. And I think that's in some ways kind of a waste, right? Wouldn't it be nice, buddy, if, let's say you leveled up through Eastern Kalimdor, or Eastern. I literally just mixed the two continents because I'm an idiot. But let's say you leveled up through Eastern Kingdoms, and then you're at level cap, and today you could either do some daily bullshit to get some gold, because one of the things you're working toward is the Infinity Gold mount that gets released in every expansion. Instead of doing that, could you go do some maybe you even rush it dailies, you could only do so many upgrade so many old content quests to do. Wouldn't it be nice if you could go do some of that Kalimdor content and not feel like you are effectively wasting your time to building towards your end game goals? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to be able to do, essentially?
I mean, I guess to a certain extent, but I really think I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, what's your hesitancy? I'm curious.
I think there really is something to that engagement of doing it for the first time, right? WoW behaving like Skyrim. I don't know, I don't know, man. That's a really rough one to kind of parse out. I think at the end of the day, it's tough because there isn't a it's not a one size fits all. You know what I mean? Everybody has a different thing, a different kind of sense on what it should be. And so, yeah, hypothetically, I want this stuff to be tailored precisely to me or whatever. But I think in a world where World of Warcraft behaves like Skyrim for, 100 levels, and then it starts behaving like League of Legends, that's a pretty okay world to live in. Even if it behaves like Skyrim for 100 levels and then starts behaving like Destiny, I'm fine with that. Because I think that there's something, look, I don't play WoW because I'm looking for moving emotional experiences, right? Or because I'm trying to, think critically and hard about every single choice and decision that I'm making, right? I play WoW because sometimes I just want to turn my brain off. I want to hit my stuff. I want to do my rotation as best as I possibly can, and I want to watch Batman vs. Superman on the other screen, right? And I think that having a world where I can almost anchor my day in coming back and doing those dailies, or coming back and clearing out my garrison missions, that I don't know, that feels good. It might be a Skinner box, but it's a very satisfying Skinner box.
And that's fine, but to speak to what I'm talking about, I don't really see a downside to enabling later players to do the earlier content to their own level, essentially. I think this is kind of because at that point it's kind of I want a reason to go back and experience those neat story beats that I missed my first character around, or when I was leveling my character, or when I was, for whatever reason, right? Either I spammed dungeons, or I did Eastern Kingdoms instead of Kalimdor, or vice versa. Isn't it, I feel like it's kind of a waste of the work that's been put into those things to not let, me going back to Kalimdor. One of the areas I remember on Billabong that Bill Mung is my monk character. Is there's this area in Kalimdor where the whole kind of bit of the area is you rank up through like this guy's kind of army in the zone. And you get like an effect every time you zone in. Do you know what I'm talking about, buddy?
For clarity, you're talking about Stone Talon Mountains.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, this happened to me consistently on this character because I did like to kind of finish out the content in a zone. So I'd finish out a zone, and then I'd be like halfway into the level of the next zone, and like I'd pop up through that. Like I do like a quarter to half the content of that next zone because then I'd be able to immediately slingshot into the zone beyond that and do that entire zone. Mm-hmm. So effectively, I did every other zone. Mm-hmm. And there's part of me that like saw that kind of little thread and was like, oh, that's neat, but then was like, well, I'm like, I could put myself kind of behind on this curve further and like be literally getting no experience from the mobs I'm killing, or I could slingshot ahead to the next area, and like I got like the first snippet of that kind of experience, and like the Stone Talon Mountain is the one that sticks out to me the most because it's also situated in a place that like you end up traversing through the square, and the buff kind of fucking pops up with the sound every time you fly through the area.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I never advanced that quest line just kind of kept being reminded to me as it like passed through the corner of the area and go like thunk, your rank is private or whatever. Like I never have any reason to go back and finish that quest line other than for like my own personal amusement. And that generally puts me behind on the things I want to do to advance my endgame content. And I think that's a waste of that content, essentially. That like there's no good reason in my mind why I shouldn't be able to go, like why I shouldn't be able to have an incentive to go back and do that. Or like, so this is gonna sound weird, but I don't see a good reason why that shouldn't be incentivized, barring the work put in to make that system work.
I mean, so at what point though is that about adding something rather than just taking away the current leveling content, right? What isn't the real answer you're looking for something like a buff, right? That when you hit max level, all of the gold you gain for low level quests is scaled, or the enemies and the gold together are scaled. So it's not like you're walking around hitting everybody with frost shock every 4 seconds, one shotting them, right? That to me, that sounds solid, right? That sounds fine.
Okay,
I'm down for that 100%. But to me, that's not about taking away that leveling system for the first time, that's about adding it after the fact. It's the combination of those two things where you're saying, let's strip the leveling system and then put it on the back end. It's like, yeah, sure, if you want to back end beef up this early game content, I'm with you 1,000,000%.
Okay, I think that's fair. Yeah. I think that's fair.
In a certain sense, not to pimp my own ride, but in a certain sense, I think Final Fantasy does that the right way, because it is the same character. But there's other nuances to all of that.
Yeah,
anyway.
So actually, if we want, Final Fantasy is another game we could talk about because even though you don't play it, you do GM it, so you know some stuff.
I do know a little bit. Just a smidge.
So that's actually, I think, a good example of what frustrates me most about these leveling systems, which is that Final Fantasy 14, in the way that it kind of works, grinding mobs is not very efficient. Like the quests are much better at leveling you up, and so even for just leveling the 15 levels of your secondary class to get the secondary class effects, to me at least, was murderous. It was terrible. I hated it. Like it just felt so long, and that's low enough that you can still like leverage a lot of quests to still get you to that point.
Yep.
You just can't you can't leverage like the big old story quest. You just get all the side quests in the area. that's like that was actually one of my bigger kind of things for this is that like I think part of my big thing for a lot of these games is like I have tried a half dozen different MMOs looking for something that ultimately, even though like, you know, after a month or two, every time I go back to WoW, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And I quit the game again. It's something that only WoW has ever been able to really succeed at with me, which is kind of keeping me locked in long enough to get to the end game content, and then the end game content sustains itself for a while. So maybe talking about this through the lens of WoW is a bad thing because, you know, WoW
is the best version of it, almost.
Or and Guild Wars 1, because I will pimp Guild Wars 1 at every opportunity.
Sure, I mean, I never played Guild Wars 1. I think WoW is... I'm sure one day we'll do a cast on like greatest of all time, but WoW is 1,000,000% in my like greatest games of all time, right? It absolutely deserves its place, so to speak, kind of at like, you know, the top of the pantheon of my hours played. You know, like I look at Total War Warhammer and I'm like 91 hours, you know, like 91 hours played or whatever, and I'm like, oh wow, geez, I've just thrown my life away playing fucking Guild Wars. I'm loading up World of Warcraft right now, and I'm gonna do /played on Baron, and we're gonna talk about how ridiculously terrible my life is that I've put however many days into that character. But I think that is really truly like that's not an accident. Right, that's not a skin. This is what kills. This is, you know, people talk about like the Skinner box of it, and that is, you know, and all this kind of stuff. That's not a Skinner box. I don't think a Skinner box really could hold my attention that long. And maybe it's because I'm an RPer, right? That adds a ton of time to these games. You know, 100%. That adds tons of time. Maybe it's because for a long time I was a progression raider, right? And I was in the thick of it when it came to. You know, I was in the thick of it of getting in and doing my dailies and hitting stuff, you know, getting all of my bosses down each week on kind of on cooldown or whatever. But I have 116 days played total on Baron, lifetime, I guess. But the real depressing number is that 17 of those days have been at level 100. So that's sad. My life is coming into perspective a little bit more. I don't know. It's tough because, you know, like, honestly, not to get, like, too personal for a second, but...
Next week, Buddy's going to quit the podcast because he's got on a soul-seeking adventure in Alaska.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, like, WoW has really been a big, you know, it's like a big thing for me. I had a big falling out with my freshman year friends, in sophomore year, like kind of between freshman and sophomore year or whatever.
Of Hopkins?
Yeah, at Hopkins.
Spoilers. We went to that school. Should I edit that out?
No, they can know. Okay. I'm proud to be a Johns Hopkins alum.
I'm fine. I'm proud of being a Johns Hopkins alum. I'm just concerned. No one listens to the podcast anyway, but you know.
What is the concern? Just...
I don't know. A crazy person like slowly pieces together the things that we've let out about this cast. And, like shows up at my door one day and is like, "I would like to wear your face on my face."
Oh well, I don't really worry. I mean, sure. I guess I could also worry about a plane crashing into my apartment and burning me alive. But you know,
you don't have planes through shutters.
We're not. Yeah, these things are so like low probability.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just a paranoid person. Sure. But
anyway, I had a big falling out with a lot of my freshman year friends, right? And I moved around a lot as a kid, so you know I'm not very bad at like this kind of like, oh, your friends all suck now, let's get new ones kind of thing. But the new ones I found for sophomore year, I played World of Warcraft, right? And I was a progression raider, and that was my social life basically, and that was great. That was awesome, right? That's probably what kept me from like a spiral of like depression and self-loathing, right? And then obviously junior year rolled around, our Dungeons and Dragons club in college happened, right? That's how you and I became good friends and everything like that. You know, when I was a senior and I was I wrote a full-length screenplay because I was a writing student, which was an incredibly unusual thing to do at the time. I had to stop playing League of Legends because I didn't have to. I stopped playing League of Legends and I started playing WoW, and I started RPing in WoW again because it was just way more conducive to kind of like my need and ability to be in like a writing mindset, almost, to have WoW on one screen and like the screenplay on another and swap between them, or be thinking about, the stories that I'm doing in World of Warcraft at the same time that I'm thinking about, the scenes and the minute to minute of my screenplay or whatever. Honestly, even for Warlords of Draenor, right? A lot of the preliminary work in Hell's Rebels, all of that stuff was kind of fueled by like WoW creative juices going nuts in my brain. And I'm reaping the benefits of this stuff now, right? Like all of this stuff that's happened in book 1, this didn't come out of nowhere. Some of it did, obviously. Some of like the filler sessions, or like, when I have to respond to you guys doing whatever. But most of this stuff has been roadmapped out from a year ago, right? Before Hell's Rebels even dropped, right? Before I even had the first book in my hands, I knew how I wanted to run the first book of the game. Right. That was such an issue that I was behaving that way, right? Because this is how World of Warcraft affects my brain. That one of our friends didn't want to play Hell's Rebels anymore because he was so furious that I was refusing to play the Paizo material as written. And to call that, right? And to look back at all that and to call that, like, oh wow, it's just a Skinner box. I cannot help but disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd ever say that WoW is. I don't know. So I don't know why you quit playing WoW when you do, because I think both of us have.
By the way, I have no answer. To that. One day, it's literally just one day. I sit down and I like hover over the play button and I'm like, nah, and I just do something else.
Yeah, for me, it's usually like, it's like at some point I'll be like, and then I like, I know I got, at some point I'll like be doing dailies and I'll be like, oh, I have to, I got to do my dailies before I get to have fun. And I'll be like, wait, what did I just say to myself? Right. Like, and then like a week later, I'll be like, oh, it's not that. And then like a week later, it's like, I'm done. It's much kind of the similar way of like, I hover over the play button. It's like, I mean,
and honestly, this is something that happens to me in every game. Like it happens to me. It happened to me in Warhammer, right? I was playing Warhammer every day, and I was going through, and then I would beat the game, and I would start it up all over again, and I would keep playing it every day, keep playing and keep playing and keep playing, and then one day I just didn't. I just was like, nope, I'm out. I don't need any of this anymore. All of my, this is how I stopped playing Skyrim, right? It's not like I ever get to a point in Skyrim where I'm like, okay, I've accomplished everything I ever want to accomplish in Skyrim. It's like, no, it's just, one day I got to one particular spot, and for no reason whatsoever, boom, up, no more Skyrim for Buddy kind of thing. This happens to me in everything. It's not just World of Warcraft.
So kind of side note on Skyrim, I'm kind of like resisting my urges to replay more of Skyrim, because I just want to save that moment for when the Legendary Edition comes out. And that way I could like kind of blow my Skyrim resurgence load in November. I really have to go back to Skyrim. I was really depressed the other day because I was talking about my most played Steam games. I just put Steam in my browser bar and it just showed me all of my it just instantly brought me to the link of my playtime per hours. And I'm happy with how I play games on Steam or whatever, right? It's not like I feel bad about it, but it's one of those things where I look at it's like, okay, Civ 5, cool. Your Universalis, fine. Payday 2, Total War, Skyrim is in that top, fine. Oh, nice. And then 3 hours, Skyrim is 111 hours. 3 hours under that Skyrim is Fallout 4, and I just look at that Fallout 4, I'm like, fuck you, Fallout 4. Get the fuck out of here. You're not allowed to be in my top games played ever for a game that I dislike so much. What? But
Yeah,
you know,
but I do fully intend to go back to Skyrim.
if you want to kind of like sate that desire, Witcher's a good game to kind of do. I was actually considering starting up Witcher again and doing Witcher instead of, because they just released new content and it's kind of like that's
Yeah, I
at
heard
the
about that. It's a huge DLC.
yeah, and
Came out for them.
it's out at the end of it's kind of at the end of its content cycle.
Mm.
So that was a game that I always kind of wanted to wait for everything to come out before I really dug into it. So I might try and I might go for that. I have it on Good Old Games because I got it free with my video card.
Wow, fair enough.
So I don't get the nice Steam sales for the DLC, I guess, but
yeah, I mean, I have the same thing for like I really want to go back to Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition, I feel really bad about because I never actually beat the game. I'm pretty sure I'm really close to the end, but I got like 60 hours in, and it's crazy. I got 60 hours in. I love every minute of it. Right? I think Dragon Age Inquisition is a fantastic game, and yet I just got to that point, right, where it was like, okay, no more Dragon Age Inquisition, and it just happened to be, probably, 90% of the way through the game.
yeah.
I don't know. I definitely want to go back to all this stuff. I too am waiting for the the super remastered version of Skyrim, because I think that game is beautiful.
To get a little bit back on message, or to get back on topic. No, not that this was a bad use of our time, but the thing to kind of wax philosophical, like the thing about WoW for me, I think, has always been like when the leveling was bad in vanilla. I always had kind of like my friends waiting, like my friends sitting at the top of the cliff, being like, "Come on, you're almost here. Come have fun with us." Even though I played maybe a grand total of like an hour with people I knew because we were all at disparate levels. But and I was like always climbing towards that goal of like the kind of like the social experience. Mm-hmm. And that's also true for like, I think like the last round, like that we all kind of like started going up together and we were all kind of like climbing to this place together. And that kind of like what was a big part of the motivator. And this time around also the leveling content isn't nearly as bad as it was in vanilla. And the thing I want out of an MMO, and like I think once you get to the top, that stuff kind of like fuels itself, right? Like I think once I hit level 1, like max level cap, I could sustain myself on that endgame content. That's always all very compelling for me. And the thing that I always wanted was an MMO. Like, I'd even be happy if they just did it in WoW instead of me having to find another game to get to the point. I don't like tab targeting. I want like an action MMO like Terra is. Like Terra's systems appeal to me. There are some things that I don't like about Terra. That kind of like a personalization based level. Gunners are locked to 2 female races. It's like 2 female versions of races, and that drives me insane because I love gunner classes, but I like playing on gender. So I settled on like this on the Lancer. Which has a grappling hook, which is another thing that I always love. But like, I couldn't push myself through that leveling content to get what I like, to get the interesting stuff. Because all the leveling content is treated like second class content. It's treated like the thing you have to get to get to the good part. Mm. And like, I don't know. I think maybe where this kind of like thought for me came from is like, I want to get to that level. I want to be at the good part. Like, I want to be able to survive a game long enough to get to the good part, so I can actually enjoy an action MMO.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm with you every step of the way, man.
And so,
I mean, I think the tough part is because I think the tough part comes from the MMO as like a genre, which I hate talking about in that way, is there's so many different parts of the game, right? There's the part of the game that acts like League of Legends, right? Rated Battleground PvP with my friends, right? There's the part of the game that, you know, acts like Skyrim, right? There's the part of the game, you know, like there's the part of the game that acts like fucking SimCity, for Christ's sake. That it's like, to a certain extent, I think making it so that all of those games are appealing to everyone at the same time is the wrong way to go about it. But you also kind of have to do it sometimes. And like, yeah, you can really lose me when, you know, you can really lose me on the, I don't know, the professions, right? And that sucks. That just really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
We want a perfect game and we want it now, god damn it.
I know, right? Yeah. For fucking tell me about it. Well, I mean, the good news, I think, is going forward in our lives, is that I think WoW is doing the right kinds of things. I think 14 is doing the right kinds of things, even though I've had plenty of conversations with people recently. Obviously, a lot of people at my work play 14, and hint, one of the reasons that I talk with my boss about, you know, him playing Overwatch on consoles is because he, you know, 14 is not scratching that kind of itch for him or whatever. And I think this stuff is just kind of naturally going to come in and out of favor, in the same way that League is going to come in and out of favor. You know, League was at the top of the, it was at like the top of like the PC Bong charts for like 4 years, and it just got overtaken by Overwatch. Excuse me. So.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I really want is for World of Warcraft 2 to have action combat, and then everything will be great, and then I'll find something else to complain about.
The one of the neat things I like a lot about the what is it called? About Legion is they have this thing called it's called the action camera or whatever. And you can enable it, disable it. But what it does is when you are in a fight, it takes you to a specific kind of, like it zooms you in on the fight that's happening. It's a very little thing. It's like one of those very little minor things, but I actually think it makes a big difference. Another place where it works is like when you are starting a quest, it zooms you in on you and the quest giver, right? So it's not you talking to kind of like some pixels because you have it all the way zoomed out for maximum FOV, right? It's you talking to, you know, a person that you zoom in on and you see his face. I kind of secretly have a feeling that this feature wasn't implemented earlier because the models are so poor. You know what I mean? Like, that's my tinfoil, is that they were like, oh, let's do this action camera, like Wrath of Lich King or something, and then they like, you know, implemented like an internal model of it or something like that. It's like you zoom in on Arthas's face and it looks like, you know,
all 4 polygons of it.
He's like Quasimodo or something like that. And they're just like, let's not, like, let's wait on that one.
Yeah.
I'm excited to return to WoW. We're going to have a couple of WoW-based episodes. Are you going to see Warcraft?
I need to schedule it because we're going to have a special guest on for a WoW lore episode at some point.
We've been waiting for our super special guest. I think we talked about it on the podcast for our inaugural episode of, what do we want to call that segment? Where we just talk all about game lore.
Oh, yeah.
We did it. We did one with, I think it was in, we talked a little bit about it, I guess, in the Dark Souls. In the context of Dark Souls.
Right.
But yeah, our boys, Akshay, from Friend of the Cast.
From the Unwise Index, who hasn't released an episode in a while. I should bother them about that.
I should bother them about that, too. I love listening to those guys talk about way more personal. And I got pretty personal today, but man, just, God, like, the Unwise Index are dealing with, like, existential terror of, like, living in the cosmos. And here I am.
But sometimes they also just talk.
Boxes.
Sometimes they also just talk about Drake.
That's true. I actually really did enjoy that Drake album, or that Drake. I guess it was the Drake album episode because I don't know anything about popular music or any of that. And so I learned a whole lot about Drake that I never would have otherwise knew if it wasn't for the Unwise index informing me. So, you learn something new every day.
I'm in favor of calling the lorecasts like loregasms.
Oof. I love that idea. I have regular loregasms about World of Warcraft.
Yeah, no, for me personally, it's like whenever I decide I really care about the lore, I'll go like on a binge. Like, the first of these is infamously about the lessons of Vivek, the 36 lessons of Vivek. Buddy, have you read?
I read the 36 lessons of Vivek just because I was mad that you. Like we were arguing. I think we were arguing about something, and you told me that something was the case, and I was like, "That cannot be true. That's ridiculous. That's just so ridiculous and stupid." And you were like, "It's in the 36 Lessons of Vivek. Read the fucking 36 Lessons of Vivek." And I was like, "You know what? Fine, I will."
Was it about like cutting a hole in time?
Yeah. That's exactly what it's about. It's about this like crazy universe thing. I don't know. The
Elder Scrolls lore is completely fucked. Just completely.
Don't remember them at all.
But like I do this. I did it with Elder Scrolls. I did it with Dragon Age. I did it with Skyrim. Not Sky. I just said Dark Souls.
Dark Souls. Yeah. Have you ever done it with World of Warcraft?
I've done it with pieces. I've done it with pieces, just because there's a lot of World of Warcraft and like.
Yeah.
Like Dragon Age, there's 3 games. Yeah. Dark Souls, there's 3 games. Elder Scrolls, there's a lot, but like there's also. So the thing about Elder Scrolls is there's a lot of people that care way too much about it. So much so that there's 2 shit-posting subreddits for Elder Scrolls lore.
Yeah.
So, it's that bad. But that makes it relatively easy to kind of... And I'm also... This is going to sound really terrible, but I'm personally motivated by malice for Elder Scrolls lore, because everybody likes to suck. I think his name is Michael Kirkbride's dick so hard because like
he's the guy that wrote the 36 Lessons of Vivek, right?
Yes, he's the guy who wrote most of Morrowind.
Yeah, okay.
And he writes a bunch of stuff that is like that sometimes gets incorporated into the later games, like the signs on the side of I think it's the mammoths in Skyrim. That was Kirkbride. But he also just writes other stuff.
Wait, can you explain that for?
So there are like runes painted on the sides of the mammoths by the giants in Skyrim.
Oh, really?
And there's a bunch of history to it that I don't remember off the top of my head. But he wrote about that before Skyrim came out, and they incorporated that into Skyrim. And he does some freelance work for Bethesda.
I mean, that's cool and everything, but yeah.
But then he also writes things like the Love Letter, which is like maybe in the future where like a sandstorm has taken over all of creation and like people live underground, and then something about histories like using mathematical missiles in space in the far-flung future, and that's just all fucking bullshit to me. So like like
that's funny.
That kind of like what the fuck is this kind of thing like really drove me deep into Elder Scrolls lore. But that wasn't the topic of this podcast. I'm sure we could do maybe next time we both do a Skyrim re-venturing, we can do a loregasm on Elder Scrolls lore.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I mean, I am super into World of Warcraft lore basically as an RPer, because you have to know your lore as an RPer in order to you can't play in the world if you don't know the lore of the world. But it's something that causes a lot of drama and a lot of drama with RPers, right? Like a lot of tension, a lot of drama with RPers, because naturally you start filling in blanks of the world, and you start asking. So it's a real, it's a real deep rabbit hole to go down when you start kind of interfacing with the lore in real time with your characters. But that's a sneak preview. We've been on this cast long enough, talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Even though it probably hasn't gone past our time limit, because we're going to be cutting out all of that stuff that I shouldn't have said.
Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see. But if you'd like to tune in to other stuff,
we've got Hell's Rebels on Wednesday.
We got Hell's Rebels on Wednesday. Yeah.
Just because, in an effort to make the last episode not be up like 3 days before this episode goes up, I'm going to put this episode up late. and then we'll be back on schedule. I promise, for all three of you who care. And then,
yeah, I'm so ready for us to be done with this dungeon on Wednesday.
So you said that we're probably taking the 2 weeks after that off?
Yes. We are probably taking the 2 weeks after that off to prepare book 2, because I haven't done much of the actual, adding the people to the, adding the NPCs, setting up all of that kind of stuff, which I did before for book 1. I have to do that stuff for book 2. But I'm excited. Book 2 is when it gets, really interesting, and it gets a lot more kind of like nuanced, compared to this fairly linear part where, we're getting the book. It is much more interesting. We're in a more interesting world when we're actually interfacing with what Barzillai Thrun is doing in the city, rather than trying to figure out the means to figure out what Barzillai Thrun is doing in the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I will be glad once you guys actually have the knowledge at hand to to get your shit together and take him on.
All right, and then next week, I think we should have Rune Lords. Maybe not. We'll see. It'll be a live call.
It is commonly with that game.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of the players are going through some major life changes, so things might get out of whack for a little while.
That is definitely true.
And then,
next Monday is also 4th of July. So
yeah,
that.
Happy birthday, America. Friday is Independence Day for Canada, so all you Canadians out there, celebrate.
Really?
Yeah, it's the 1st of July.
Holy shit, I did not know that.
Well, you can't. Not everybody can be as worldly as me, buddy.
That's true. I mean, fair enough. The only date I have to look forward to is tomorrow, when the Ultimate Cut for Batman vs Superman gets released.
No, buddy. We've talked about that enough.
The good news is now we've kind of gotten like to full Batman vs Superman section, because it's a meme that I will always bring up Batman vs Superman. I can always just bring up my lack of bringing up Batman vs Superman as its own joke.
Yeah.
So we're never getting away from it now, boys.
No, we're not.
This outro is, man, we have
anyway, if you want to email us with your thoughts on Batman versus Superman, email us at subderpsplaygames@gmail.com. Watch us on twitch.tv/subderpsplaygames. Links to our Facebook group, our Twitters, and our YouTube, and a bunch of stuff in the description. Comment, like, repost, do whatever the fuck you want.
Tweet me. My DMs are open, I have now learnd, because I got DM'd by a porn account.
Oof.
One of those spam accounts.
Yeah, I've been followed by a couple of them at this point. Probably due to the minor success of this podcast.
Yeah, right. Yeah, reaching all the ears out there.
But yeah, I think that's about it. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring up, buddy?
No, I am good to go. Thank you for tuning in.
Until next time, dear listeners.